Yeah.
All right, so this is why you are all here. I am super excited to introduce our meetup guest today, the incredible and wonderful Diana Larson. Thank you so much for being with us. You know, as a well-known thought leader in the Agile, she's a well-known thought leader in the Agile space and hardly even needs an introduction. So I'm going to try to keep it brief. She's a leadership agility advisor and an expert in Agile leadership. Diana's co-authored several pivotal books and models, most recently Lead Without Blame with Tricia Broderick, a must read and kind of the topic for today. And as you see, I have my copy and it's well, you know, I'm finding lots of interesting things I keep adding sticky notes to. So we encourage you to check that out. Diana is a trusted advisor, speaker, and coach with over 30 years of experience working with leaders and teams and organizations. Diana's focus is on team learning and leaders who learn out loud has been a thread throughout her career. She's co-founded and led several organizations, including FutureWorks Consulting, the Agile Fluency Project. If you haven't checked that out, I encourage you to check that out, and DianaLarson.com. So we're thrilled to have her with us. So just come and join us for some insights and wisdom today with Diana Larson. So I'm going to stop sharing and pass the reins to you, Diana.
All right.
Thank you.
Going. All right, well, so I'm just going to have this up here. If you want to take a quick screenshot of it, it's a way to get a free excerpt of the book, or if you want to buy the book, you can get a 30% off discount code or join my newsletter mailing list, which it's brand new. I'm just starting it. So you could be one of the recipients of the initial issue that's coming out soon. Also some ways to contact me here. So if you want to just grab a screenshot of this, that's unfortunately, I'm not on Twitter anymore because they blocked me. I made the mistake of putting my Mastodon link in my profile, and that's all it took, as far as I could tell. Yes.
I think
So
you can get
anyway,
back on at this point, though.
Pardon?
That's no longer a restriction. I believe you can get back on at this point.
Yeah, at this point, I don't really want to. So anyway, let's keep going. Let's just keep going. Thank you, Edward. So today we're here to talk about lead without blame and why it matters to leaders and to their teams. And for leaders, it really is about, and when we say leaders, as I'm going through this whole thing, Tricia and I said, we want this to be talking to leaders, no matter what your leadership role is or where it comes from. It might come from a formal leadership title, but it might come from the fact that you know more about a certain topic than anybody else, and you have influence and have leadership because of that. So in some way or another, we are almost all leaders. And all of us as leaders want to be able to achieve the best we can with the people and teams that we are working with. And so that's what Lead Without Blame is about. That's, you know, how do we get the most out of the time that we spend together at work? So Jamie already talked about things that I've done in the past and the most recent book. So when I look back over my history with the Agile Alliance, and even actually before that first model over there on the left, is the team communication model that I actually created in the early 90s before I really had encountered anything about Agile. But I've always had this affinity for working with people who have to work in teams or whose work is done best in teams, and how learning happens in groups like that, and then how leaders can manage their own learning and help with support the learning of the people that they work with. So these are my three themes, and what's been most powerful for me about writing this book with Tricia is that I've gotten the opportunity to bring those three things together, as opposed to talking about one or the other of them at any given time. So yeah, it was a pleasure and a privilege to write this book with Tricia. We learned a lot from each other, which was just not so surprised. I mean, I sort of expected that to happen, really, but it was, I didn't know what all I would learn from her, and I didn't know what all I would have to share with her. And so that was part of the pleasure of writing this, was, you know, those emerging understandings. And we found where we had a lot of things in common and where we had some kind of different perspectives that we could share. So it was just a great experience. And if you get the chance to attend a talk with Tricia or interact with her at a conference, I highly recommend you take that opportunity, because she's an amazing human being. So while all our situations might be unique, we often, from organization to organization, particularly those of us who've been in a number of different organizations, we begin to notice that there are some certain patterns about leadership, and that show up over and over again, you know, from department to department or from organization to organization. We may see those things. And, you know, at this point, having talked to a lot of people about this, I think we've all been there. So think about this story. Something didn't go right. Just built something didn't go right. It didn't go to plan. It didn't go as everyone had expected it to go. So now we have the dreaded, we need to figure out what happened meeting coming up. People are getting their fingers ready for pointing, because no one wants the blame to fall on them, right? So in spite of our best attempts at good leadership, in spite of knowing that it's best to focus on learning and improving and what's going to come next, these sessions too often turn into looking at the past and assigning blame for what went wrong. Anybody else? I mean, show of reactions, whatever reaction you like from the thing. Anybody else ever been in a meeting like this? Yeah, yeah. It's a familiar pattern. We see it happen all the time, and this is why, you know, why Tricia and I wrote the book, because we've been there as well. And I try not to be a person who's getting my finger ready to point, but I also don't want the blame to fall on me. So how do we make sure that that doesn't happen? Well, what we want to do is focus on, when are we seeing blame and shame happening? That we have to have an awareness of it before we can avoid it. And blame comes from the outside. You know, either we are imposing it on someone else or someone else is imposing it on us. And it's a judgment. It's a moral, professional, social, you did it wrong. You aren't doing it right. And it's a judgment that, as we're going to see later on, has a huge impact. And then the other part of that, the way these intersect, and if you've read Brené Brown and all this other, you know a lot about, I know Scrum Masters and Agile coaches have studied a lot about shame. When we feel shame, it's self-generated, because we have seen the blame, either blame from outside, or we've somehow accepted the guilt for something. And it is stressful. It makes us feel, it diminishes our self-esteem. It diminishes our sense of worth. So that's not useful. And leaders get caught in a trap of doing this. We don't really know what other options we have for leading other than saying you did it wrong, and let's find out where this went wrong and who we should talk to about that. And it's partly because we forget to take a systems view of things. And it's partly because we are so used to looking for, issues of personality. And out of that, Peter Drucker, many, many years ago, this is one of my favorite quotes from Peter Drucker. So much of what we call management consists of making it difficult for people to get their work done. So I love, years ago, I had the opportunity to be the on-site host for Ken Blanchard, who wrote the 1 Minute Manager and many, 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 many leadership and management books. And he talked about, he says, we spend a great deal of time in our recruitment and hiring process looking to bring on board those folks who are the winners, who are going to do a great job. And then we get them internal and we start treating them like losers. Right? We start micromanaging, or we start doing these other things. So how do we avoid this trap? This is still going on in 2023, even though that quote from Peter Drucker comes from decades ago. So part of it is there are things out there called leadership training, but there isn't a lot of it, and a lot of organizations don't take advantage of it. The default understanding is that leaders will lead the way others led them. And unfortunately, not all past or present leaders deserve that. They aren't all great leaders. They aren't all people that we want to emulate. So how do we do that? Well, let's break free of that. And another interesting thing to read is just in last October in Scientific American, 2 researchers published a short article. It's worth looking up. It's a pretty short article about dominant command and control leadership and the way in which it suppresses productivity and performance. So, and it also causes employees to, in their attempt to avoid being blamed, they don't help each other because, I want to stay out of the way of that. So we need to break free from blame. We need to find the way to get past the false assumptions about leadership and the fallacies that we carry around leadership and do better. So again, with reactions, who's heard you got to hold their feet to the fire, or you've got to be dominant and in control, or you got to be more efficient, not effective, or we've got shareholder pressure, we've got to meet our quarterly numbers, and everybody needs to be fully utilized, right? We've tried that before. It didn't work. Stay in your lane. There's all those kinds of things out there that we hear over and over again that just really get in the way of effective leadership. Particularly this idea of efficiency and 100% utilization being important, when what we really need is effectiveness, which sometimes needs redundancy and slack in order to happen. The idea of a project focus, when particularly for those of us in the software world, we're working on products that may have a very long life. There isn't a particular beginning and end. We need to keep going on them and look at each successive outcome for that product. And, quarterly profits, all those kinds of things, and individual accountability over how do we get to the best performance of everyone. And so all of those things are just fallacies that we need to get past. So instead, I want to focus on what leaders really want. Most leaders have very worthy goals. They want to support customer satisfaction. They want to help their business grow and retain those customers, and they want to engage their teams and the people who work with them to have the best possible performance, because we are all have that sense of wanting to be able to be proud of the work that we do. And so those are all great goals for leaders to have. Get that back over here. And leaders have honorable intentions around those. They want to help the business succeed. They want to help their colleagues and their teams succeed. They want to help themselves succeed. And yes, we wrote this book for everyone who understands that in order for all of us to thrive under chaotic situations, we need to think differently about leaders. And good intentions are great, but impact matters more. So when we think about blame, and all the people who've been writing about blame, what we have learned is that blame and shame suppress productivity and they suppress performance. We can't do our best when we are worried about these things. The most skilled person in the world, if they get tangled up in feeling blame and shame, is not going to be able to perform at that high standard. So what's a leader to do? Well, we developed a model called the 4 C's of learning leaders. And these actually give you some clues about some of the behavior changes that we need from our leaders. Oops. There we go. And the 4 C's we call courage, compassion, confidence, and complexity. I used to talk about the 3 C's, but when writing this book, we added a 4th one, and I'll mention that in a minute. But we continually need to be focusing on our ability to strengthen ourselves as leaders in these 4 areas. The courage to be able to say, I don't know, I have something to learn. I need to, I don't have the answers here. We live in a world where there has been this assumption that our leaders and managers have all the answers. And so we shouldn't make any decisions. We should just go ask them what to do. And that is our world moves too fast for that to happen. So we need to be able to lead and encourage discovery by showing that we are discovering as well. And that's a strength. It's not a weakness. It is a strength to have that kind of courage. Another piece is compassion. When people are in situations where they need to do a lot of learning, which software is, I think software has moved beyond knowledge work. I think software work is learning work. We are continually learning about the behavior of the code with TDD and other kinds of things and peer reviews and so on. We are learning about what our customers need. We're learning about what assumptions we made and that might turn into defects along the way. We learn through our retrospectives, we learn in teams, and learning takes time. I mean, if you even think back to when you were learning to tie your shoes, or the last time you learned to do something like serve a tennis ball or what, you were awkward at it at first. We all are awkward at first when we're learning something new. We need that time to practice, and then we get to accelerate. But there is that dip there. We call it the learning curve, right? Where there is that dip, and leaders need to have the compassion to be patient through that. Also, a lot of people have had bad experiences in learning. Many people who go to public schools, not all, I mean, I did great in public schools, but I know a lot of folks who really were discouraged in some way from their learning journeys because of the experience they had in public schools, and they may be fearful about it or just want to put it off. And so being able to have the compassion to work through those fears with folks is really important. And then once we have kind of developed that sense of now our teams really know how to do the learning they need to do to get the job done, we need to show that we have confidence in their, not only in the things they have learned, but in their ability to learn new things, because that's coming up more and more and more. So, and then finally, complexity. We live in a VUCA world. For those of you who don't know VUCA, it stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. There's a lot been written about VUCA. I'm not going to go into it deeply here. It's worth checking out. But it is about living in a complex world where things work together in unexpected ways to make new things emerge, and new technologies emerge, new world events emerge, new pandemics emerge, and that we didn't expect, but we need to be able to react to and deal with, and really understand what does that mean to live in a world that is fast moving and highly complex. So the questions here have to do with how can I better embody these learning leaders 4 C's. And, you know, in the book, we try to give some tips, but it's not the only place to look for those things. You can find those things in other places as well. And the trouble is that VUCA gets in the way, the sense of complexity. Leaders, as we've said, they want to achieve its own results. I've seen it, you've seen it, I've felt it. I want to get things done. Yet we often miss the opportunities to help our teams thrive in uncertainty and chaos, because those are becoming the norms, not the exception. And it's so tempting to rely on old learnings and old understandings. So what Tricia and I have brought forward is a model that we call leadership through learning. And if the leaders have those 4 C's embedded, then we've got the bottom part of the arrow here. We've got leadership through learning happening. And then we understand that teams are motivated differently than individuals, and that there are some factors, some learning, that's what we call team resilience factors that help teams become those kinds of resilient learning teams that can learn their way through any challenge that is facing them. So the 3 team motivators are purpose, autonomy, and co-intelligence. And I'm not going to read this slide to you, but the idea being, I mean, and that's very similar. It's similar to what Dan Pink said about purpose, autonomy, and mastery for individuals, but this is team purpose. A team needs to understand why they've been brought together to work together. Autonomy, the sense that the team understands where their boundaries are, how permeable or not permeable those boundaries are, who are us and who is them in a good way, you know, who are the parties we need to work with as a team, and what permissions to make decisions and even team budget decisions are going to happen within the team. And in that way, the team will then hold itself accountable to producing what they've been asked. And then the biggest difference, I think, comes in this idea of co-intelligence. In Dan Pink, he talks about mastery individual mastery. Well, when we work together in teams, how do we do that? You know, everybody on the team can't know everything, but we can rely on team co-intelligence. If we create teams who can fill in the gaps where they know they need to learn and they have the autonomy to do that, then they're able to perform better. So, and it's very motivating. If you've been on a team that understands why it was brought together, that knows who, you know, who have their own identity, know who they are and why they're there, and then can rely on each other's skills and abilities and perspectives and backgrounds and all diversity and all those things. If you've ever been on a team like that, and maybe you are on one now, in which case, congratulations. But if you've ever been on a team like that and left it, you know, you're always trying to figure out how to get that back. So anybody here who's had that kind of an experience, it might have been a sports team, might not have been a work team, might have been some other kind of team, but that's an experience to rely on and to really integrate. And then of course those motivators work together. You really need all three, and so leaders are trying to create environments where all three of those motivators are available to the team. And then there are 4 team resilience factors. And we are forming, nurturing, sustaining team excellence. We get psychological safety and dependability from the kinds of trust and collaborative connections that we make on our teams. Trust is a big part of that collaborative connection resilience factor. Another resilience factor is how well the team has developed the skills in embracing conflict, because conflict, well done, is the path to innovation and creativity and more learning and so on. So knowing when conflict is emerging, being able to take advantage of it, then make feedback routine on your teams. So you're taking the conflict in small bites. And a leader can model that behavior for how to handle conflict. So this isn't an easy job. Well, I'm not saying it's an easy job, but it is a possible thing to do. And then finally, inclusive collaboration, understanding the role and impact of inclusion to performance, and how many more options that opens up. And then people on the team learning to be powerful and effective bystanders. And then finally, power dynamics. This is one, those first couple we hear talked about a lot when people talk about effective teams. We don't as often hear people talk about the understanding we need about power dynamics and how those work. In the book, we talk about 4 different kinds: formal power dynamics, informal, dominant, majority power dynamics, and then power that seems to be coming from someplace that we can't figure out, and how to take that and move to a stance of not power over, but power with. Power dynamics are always present, but we can mitigate the bad parts of them, and we can help create good power dynamics in our organizations. So here are some quotes from leaders about the book. And in the book, we have in almost every chapter, we have something like, but what if this is going on? Or we have reflection questions, or we tried to make this book a learning experience as well as just a book to read. So we've got lots of different ways of pulling that up. We've given examples for the resilience factors. We've given examples of retrospectives that you can use to focus on those different resilience factors and see if to help to build those from the teams. And you know, the idea of I love these 4 quotes here because they really do key off of much of what we want for leaders and hope that this book will contribute to build. So we want leaders to have that kind of sense of courage everywhere and for them to be at all levels of the organization. We want people to understand the idea about moving from efficiency to effectiveness and from coercion to collaboration. We want to help organizations and leaders get more of the things that they are looking for from their teams. And also, you know, innovation, productivity, and joy, which makes us look forward to going to work on Monday. And we're really looking forward to that. So I'm going to stop sharing and let's take some time for questions and to just have a chat.
Okay, so we do have some questions that
Great.
came in, and the first one is from Edward Gordon. And I want my Jeff and Mary, if you can kind of keep track of the questions. So whoever asks a question gets put into a drawing for a free Kindle or Audible book of Lead Without Blame. So
All right.
So Edward has there been a measurable improvement in the number of questions asked when offering extrinsic value, like a lottery drawing for not? Okay, that was probably more for me, maybe.
Apologies. Yes, that was meant to be a private message, but the next question is also mine.
Okay.
Like,
So why don't you ask it, Edward? So then if I have questions.
Yeah, let me go ahead and ask the question.
Yeah.
How do we build this new understanding of learning work rather than knowledge work into a corporate structure that we have that's so highly reliant on contractors?
Yeah.
Where there are legal requirements or just a general cultural understanding that we don't provide
Yeah.
instruction or training to individuals, not just to retain the employee contractor divide, but because that's what they think is efficient.
Right. Well, I read a LinkedIn post. A valued mentor of mine recently passed away, Edgar Schein, who, I mean, he's in his 90s and he lived a long, full life. And somebody posted on LinkedIn an anecdote about when they had a chance to talk with Edgar and ask, how do I make these changes in my organization? And he said, well, you either become the very top leader who can influence. There's 2 ways. You either become the top leader where you can influence, or you draw kind of for yourself a mental and emotional boundary around the group you want to work with. And you figure out how to do things within that group. And then sometimes other people in the rest of the organization will see the impact you're having. And this is my part, because this is what I've seen happen. Sometimes people will see the impact that you're having in your area, and you kind of get the thing about change by attraction. You can't make that happen, but you could certainly create a more satisfying work environment for the folks who are there. So, and for contractors, I think, you know, it's useful to develop a relationship with whomever the contact is who is sending those people to you. And you let them know, here are the kinds of things that we are working we need to be working on in this team. Here are the things that we need to, we need them to know. You look for the best possible ways to make learning be part of the work, right? So if they are doing the work, they are learning as part of that. It's not sending them off to a training. It's making the workplace and the work environment learningful like holding retrospectives, and that's not the only way, but even making the day, if they are participating in the daily stand-up, which I hope they are, you can switch up what kind of questions you're asking every day and make them focus more on, what did I learn yesterday that would benefit the team? What am I hoping to learn today? What gets in the way of my learning? And then problem solve around any of those impediments. Right. So you find those little ways to just kind of bring this in such a way that the contractors do get to participate in them, and not do as much with formalized training that is prohibited. But then you can also go and advocate.
Yeah.
I really need these people to know this thing, and I'd really love, several folks to go off to this training so that they could all bring it back. And how can we make that happen?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Sure.
So Logan Larson, he asked, how do you adjudicate between individual motivating factors and team motivating factors, and how do they come into conflict?
Well, for me, when I think about purpose, autonomy, and co-intelligence, one of the first places I start, maybe this will be obvious to some folks, is I start with chartering the team. I start with working with the product people and the sponsors of the product or project that they're working on, and we get a really good vision for what that product needs to do for customers. And then we create a mission about how's the team going to do that work. And we look for some ways to then continually, if you use OKRs or whatever, but some way to continually be checking in on the indicators. We call them mission tests in the Liftoff book. Are we making progress in the way that we hope we make progress, which is great around purpose and begins the sense of autonomy. We're the ones who are working on this. And then further autonomy has to do with the other parts of chartering. What are our team agreements? Do we have working agreements? Do we have simple rules for how we behave when we're not together as a team? Do we, what kinds of understandings? And then co-intelligence comes from how, who has what kind of skills on our team. Let's do an inventory. That Alyssa Atkins has a wonderful thing that she borrowed from Peter Drucker called Marketplace of Skills. It's in her book, about how do we make that assessment, and then how can somebody who wants to learn from somebody else, it stimulates that idea of generalizing specialists, right? So that's one of the ways that I would start. And then you start asking the team, do you know enough about this product that you're building? Do you know enough about what those customers needs? How can I feed more of that? And how can we make sure you're getting more of that information? Do you need to go on a field trip to sit with the customers to know what they're doing? So you look for all those kinds of opportunities to focus on purpose, autonomy, and co-intelligence everywhere you can. I mean, once you have that sense of those are the essential motivators, this is how people are going to connect and really perform. Well, then you start seeing those opportunities more often to how can you make those things happen. And of course, we've got a bunch of ideas in the book as well.
Awesome. So, and I'm gonna not pronounce this right. Is it JRM? JRM? Maybe you can ask your question. Is he still here? Well, this question is, how can we coach the high-level leaders in the org on continuous learning improvement mindset, on having that? It's always, I have the same question, really. It's, how do we coach the
well, yeah. Some of you may have heard me, because I get this kind of question a lot. I'm not in the convincing business. I don't try to convince anybody of anything. I look for folks who are open to learning, and that's who I like to work with. So in that situation, I don't try to convince those higher level leaders. If they're set in their ways, they're set in their ways. I might start polishing my resume, because all of our jobs are really in demand at this point. And I look for people who can become, who I think seem to be exhibiting symptoms that they could be allies in this, that they also have an interest in continuous improvement, that they also have an interest in greater effectiveness over and higher performance, even resilient learning team kind of performance, that they also understand that we live in a chaotic world where anything can happen and we need to be prepared for that, and make common cause with them. Start having coffee, start, whatever you can do around that, remotely. I mean, some of us are getting really good skills at how to be effective influencers in a remote kind of way. And then I wait for other folks to come to me and say, how can I make this? Yeah, I see what you're, I think I see what you're doing here, and I like what I see. How can we make more of this happen? The most important person for you to influence, I think, is whoever your direct boss is. Not all the way up the scale, but if you can get that person, if you can talk to that person about what it is you're trying to accomplish, and discover that they are willing to support that, and that they are willing to advocate for you with their peers, and the people they report to, then you can create a bubble of effectiveness. But trying to, and this assumes your direct boss is open to this. If your direct boss is not open to this, depending on your situation, polish up your resume and go look for a direct boss that will support this. And I know that's not possible for everybody. I know people are tied to healthcare and all of those kinds of things. Kids in college that need their tuition paid, or private school or whatever. But that is an indicator that you are not in a healthy workplace. If you can't have this kind of a conversation about how to make things better for everyone with your boss, and you try to have that conversation and they just won't listen, then you already have an indicator that you are not in a healthy workplace. So I'm not saying you should leave that place right away, but I am saying you should look for other opportunities, because they are out there. There are people who are trying to do better, and we need to give them more light and air by seeking them out. And it, it's sad, but it's true. I mean, a lot of people, all those things I said in the first part of my talk about the leadership assumptions and fallacies and, dominant leaders, suppressing performance, that's just no good. But there are some people that's how they've made their way, and they are unwilling to let that sense of command and control go. And so all you can do is look for a better space. If they are uninfluenceable, you can start saying, you could give them the article, the Scientific American. If they are influenced by research, give them that Scientific American article. Hey, have you seen this? Does this apply where we are here in this organization? I mean, get curious. Don't get, demanding or shake your finger, because you can't, if you blame them, then we're all still in the same trap, right? So, but you can be curious about, I'm really trying to improve things here. And I found this article and I wonder what this means about the way we do work here. Can we have that conversation? So influencing skills are important. You might want to look into that. And yeah, I'll stop there.
I think there's a book or maybe there were, actually it was one of our meetups. And it was about influence without authority.
Yeah.
And so I would check out our YouTube channel and find that video. It was an excellent session on influence, how you can have influence without authority. It was excellent. So
I'm pretty sure I've got a book on my shelf over there that is titled that. Yeah. Yeah.
So we have so many questions and we only have 6 minutes left. So I apologize if your question doesn't get answered, but I'm just going in order. And so the next question was, well, there was Aaron, your question on practices to establish the, actually, I'm sorry. It is a different question. Okay, Aaron, what are some of the practices that you suggest to establish the essential team motivators and team resilience factors?
Well, certainly the motivators, as I said to Logan, the liftoff and team chartering is a good place to start, or any, a lot of the, Jonathan Rasmussen has written about team initiation events. I mean, there's a lot out there about that. And if your team is already existing, then it's not an initiation event, it's a reset. Right. And it's still the same thing. Right. So that's one of the big things. Another way is to support retrospectives and other kinds of learning events and, continuous improvement and learning events. And make sure that they are focusing on some of those things. How is our team's sense of purpose? Do we really understand why we're doing the work that we're doing? What more do we need to know to really feel confident that we understand the why? Do we need to bring our product owner in, some exploration around that? Or, how is our team autonomy? How could we feel more autonomous as a team? What would we need to do? And what would we need to ask? What kind of support would we need to ask from others? For co-intelligence, it's, let's do an inventory. Do we have the skills that we need? And what are our skills gaps? And who do we need to recruit? And or do we want to do some transfer of knowledge between and among team members so that we build a deeper bench? Every sports team has more than one person who can play a position, right? I mean, it's a common thing for teams to do that, right? That they are building co-intelligence, people who know how to step in when that's needed. And so it's those kinds of things. I mean, there are a lot of things. I'm going to keep that short. So yeah, there are a lot of things, and there are ideas in the book as well. Yeah.
Okay. Do we have time for one more question, you think, or should we wrap it up? Do you have a hard stop?
I don't have a hard stop.
All right, maybe we'll ask one more question.
Sheila E., it's good to see you here. I usually only hear you on the Agile Coaching Network.
Welcome.
Yeah.
So
sorry,
Charlene
Jamie.
asked, no problem. Charlene
You just ended up right in the middle of my screen on the gallery. Yeah.
So Charlene Freeman asks, how do we help leaders understand that their decisions are creating a blame game environment?
At the risk of I might go in and say, hey, I just read this really great book that I'd like to share with you. Yeah. There's some really new ideas about leadership in here, and maybe you tuck that Scientific American article folded up in the book or whatever, and you just say, if you get a chance to read this, I'd love to talk to you about it.
That's perfect.
And it at least, it's a gift. And, nobody's going to turn down a gift, and or probably not. And, it might give you an opening.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to just say thank you so much for being here today, Diana, for answering so many great questions. And there's several more questions, and for those of you who asked questions and it didn't get answered, you'll still be entered into the drawing for the Kindle or Audible book, and I'll contact you if your name is drawn. So thank you so much for everybody for your engagement, for being here with us today at Scrum Masters of the Universe. We always look forward to these events. And Diana Larson, again, thank you. You are a special guest, and we feel honored to have you today and sharing your time so freely and graciously, and your knowledge with us. So I look forward to finishing this book. And I encourage the rest of you to read it. It's incredible.
Yeah, I think book clubs. I would love to. Both Tricia and I have said that if somebody's doing a book club with the book, let us know, and we will be happy to show up. Maybe not every session, but once in a while, and talk with you about it. Yeah.
Perfect. I love it. It'd be even great. This hint, Diana, book club supplemental guide.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I'll mention that to Tricia. That's a good idea.
Guide.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thanks again for being here today, and have a wonderful rest of your week. Have a great Friday tomorrow, or maybe you're already in Friday, but thank you, everyone. We'll see you later. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.